So, hello to everybody who is just joining us for this webinar today, which is going to be on the subject of everything telecommunications, really. Internet is the main one, but as you know, we all really carry the internet around with us as well, and we need phone plans to be able to do that. And then we also have things like landline phones, which are still quite useful when you're living in Portugal as a foreigner, due to the better connectivity that you get with that. And then we're going to talk a little bit briefly about television as well. But really, I think the main focus today is going to be internet. It's probably not the most important thing you need to think about when you're moving to Portugal. Questions like visas and making sure that everything that you want to get shipped to Portugal gets shipped. Those are probably bigger things, but internet is something you really, really want to get right. There is nothing worse than being stuck in a property with a bad internet connection. You're stuck in a contract and you can't get out of it. Or perhaps to have bought a property only to realize once you get in there that you can't actually get internet, which is actually something that happens quite a bit. But hopefully, as everyone is joining us today, you guys are all going to get to avoid that. I think the best thing I can say today about internet in Portugal is that it's really, really good. A lot of people have questions when they're moving to Portugal about what sort of speed will I get, what sort of costs will I pay? And Fernando, who is joining us and is our expert today, is going to talk a little bit more about that. But I can say from traveling around all four corners of Portugal, I've been to pretty much all of mainland Portugal and the islands. I haven't really had problems with internet in Portugal. I've been to a lot of countries in Europe, including some of the countries where we normally associate with having, better quality services. And I can say that the internet in Portugal is better. It's, I will say, also better than a lot of other countries that I've been to in North America as well, and Asia. So if you can make sure that you get it right, if you do your research and make sure that you choose the right provider for your property and make sure there is internet there, it's not going to be a problem for you. But we have Fernando Mendes today, who is going to talk us through everything to do with internet, everything to do with phones and television. Fernando was, according to my research, he was born in central Portugal, but moved to Canada as a child and then moved back to Portugal as an adult, where he studied and became an estate agent. So he has that experience of living abroad, of living in North America and coming back to Portugal and sort of seeing it with the same sort of eyes that we all see Portugal through. He initially focused as an estate agent. I hope I'm getting all this correct, Fernando. And then he began focusing more on other services such as home internet and mobile phone plans, which is really, really helpful because there are a lot of estate agents in Portugal, but there aren't so many people who really specialize in this and really, really know their stuff. And Fernando is the only person that I've come across who really, really knows about internet. I know that whenever I send him someone, he can tell them exactly whether they can get internet at their property or which mobile phone or cell phones he thinks are going to be the best for that person if they move to that area. So let's see, we've got a lot of questions from people, and you can actually still give questions as well. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions about internet or phones or television, put them in there and we'll do our best to answer them. We already have quite a few to get to, so we mightn't be able to get through them all, but we will definitely do our best. The other thing I would say is if you have a property that you are moving into or that you already own and you want to know whether you can get internet there, there is a link which I'm going to put in the chat now, and you can fill that out and Fernando will check to see what internet options are available at that property. So I've just put that into the chat now, which should go to everybody. And I will get started with the first question. So, Fernando, we're going to talk a little bit about costs first for internet. But before we do that, why did you get started in this field?
So first of all, good afternoon to everyone. Want to first of all say thank you very much to James. He's a lovely guy. He's done fantastic work with his website. I think he's helped many people come over. It's always a pleasure for me to do these webinars. I love to speak, sometimes speak a bit too much, but I love it. And just to say that it's always for me grateful to help people. And if there's something I want to start saying is do not be shy. As I say, there are never stupid questions. Ask all you need. As James said, and well, I was born here. I grew up in Canada. That's why you're gonna notice my accent. And I know how it is coming to Portugal. Kind of like, or living abroad, you feel like you run into a big concrete wall and you have all these doubts. So don't be shy and ask. Starting here with the first question, James, why did I start in this field? I started as an estate agent. Then, unfortunately, we had the crisis of 2009. And then all of a sudden, I realized that the three major operators in Portugal, which I represent because I'm an independent salesman, I can work with all three of them, Mel, Nosh, and Vodafone. They have English-speaking staff. However, people at the call center, they're there, they don't seem to be sometimes that worried in the sense of what it is living out here, what are the difficulties, what are the questions. So I thought something good, actually. I like speaking English. I speak Portuguese, so I think we can join both together and help people actually get and be there successful. A lot is written on Facebook groups, a lot of discussions. Not always everything that is said is as it is said. There's a lot of sometimes services are not what people are saying. There's not these problems people seem to have. Things can be very simple as long as we can do. And the reason I do this, and I'm not saying have a bit of success, let's say the reason people enjoy working with me, because my prices are exactly the same as the operators as they have on their website. The difference is if you're coming abroad, and obviously, as James said, and very well, we are so dependent of technology. I mean, we need internet as essential as the air we breathe. It's like if we don't have internet, no oxygen, we collapse. So when someone is in, for example, America or North America, Canada and America, trying to come over, they want to make sure that on the day they arrive, they literally have their phone set up, they have home internet installation booked for that day or the following day. And if you try and get in touch with any operator with the foreign number, they will not call you back. So that's why people send me all the details, I do the contract, they sign online, and then we book installation. So for me, it was kind of like trying to find here a path, a road I can take where I can make people's life easy to actually connect to internet. It's not something that difficult, something very simple, and no need to be over stressing the issue of internet here.
Thank you very much, Fernando. Yes, I think that is an excellent point. You want the internet as soon as you arrive in Portugal, and it's not just because you want to watch Netflix or get on Amazon or something. It's because if you have just moved here, there's a million things that you need to do, and you need to research all of them and need to work out exactly how to do them. And you don't really want to wait 2 weeks for an engineer to come and install your internet. So if you can get that sorted on the day or the day after, that'll make your move to Portugal much, much easier. So jumping into costs then, because a lot of people have asked about costs, particularly those moving from the US, have wondered how the costs for internet in Portugal compare to those in other countries. So if I was to sign up for internet, Fernando, what sort of costs would I expect to pay?
This essentially has to do with what you're looking for. Let's say you were only wanted home internet, you didn't want a cell phone line or a SIM card, as you want to call it. Mm-hmm. So you have always here, when you have fiber available, which in the cities you always do, in the rural areas, we always have to check case by case, but obviously you can use that link that James has put here on the chat, which is something very easy to reach me, and that way I can answer. But let's suppose you have three options, essentially provided you have fiber available. You have 200 megabytes download speed, you have 500 megabytes or 1,000 megabytes. 200 megabytes, and again, these prices can always change a little bit depending on the offers they have, but generally we're looking at around an average price of $38.99 per month for 200 megabytes speed. We're looking at $41.99 per month on 500 megabyte speed, and we're looking at $45.99 for 1,000 megabyte speed. All of these options are always on 2-year contracts there. So that's a cost for home internet only. And when we say home internet, you also get free of charge a landline phone connection, which James said and very well. It is handy because imagine your cell phone isn't working, or you have probably relatives back home who it's easier or cheaper for them to call you on a landline than on a cell phone over here. And then you also, the operators always give you free calls to Portuguese landline numbers only, plus 1,000 minutes from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. to international numbers. And in this case of North America, that's landline and cell phone. So you get home internet, you get the landline phone connection free of charge, and you get an average of 150 TV channels free. And this is for people who understand a bit about internet. When you're installing fiber, the physical cable going into your property, inside of it, you have three small wires. You have the telephone line, you have the TV channels, and the home internet. So the same cable provides all three functions, and the fiber router will do all three at the same time. So basically, you're getting three services at the price of one.
Okay, so I think, based on what I've seen in other countries, that is very affordable. 38.99 at the moment is about $42, and then the more expensive one, which was 54.99, that is about $60. It's 59.52.
45.99, yes.
So sorry, the 45.99
599, yes, 1,000 megabyte speed, yes.
So that's just less than $50 at the moment, yes. Then. I think based on US prices, that's very, very affordable. And in terms of speed, I think that's pretty much on par with everywhere else in Europe, as far as I know.
Yes, it's more than enough. People, just one small point. When I'm speaking here of 200, 500, and 1,000 megabytes, this is the speed, because the traffic is always unlimited. That is not the traffic you're getting. Traffic is always unlimited downloads and uploads. In terms of across Europe, yes, we all have very similar speeds available. As James said, and very well, fiber here is very good. If I look at what this country was around 10 years ago when I started this career, we were the country that by far have gone the furthest down the road. We are the country that have expanded the most fiber, and the country that most updated from old dial-up internet to fiber.
So I will just ask one question that's come in on while we're on the subject, which is, what speed does someone need? You're saying there's 200, 500, and a gigabyte. Let's say that I am what I would assume would be a typical expat internet user, which is I need the internet for browsing while I'm here. I might do a little bit of sort of remote work and emails. I'm probably going to watch, Netflix or some streaming service to keep up with stuff at home. And I might have Zoom calls or Skype calls with family and friends back home. Is 200 enough, or should I be thinking more?
200 megabytes will be enough for that normal usage. What is the issue? The operators on a 200 megabyte service, they'll give you a normal router. When the client subscribes to the 500 or the 1,000 megabyte, you get a Wi-Fi 6 router, which has a bit of better performance. If you have a 200 megabyte speed, for the average couple, 2 to 3 people, it'll be enough for sure. But imagine you have Christmas time gathering and you have everyone at home. Personally, at home, I have here 1,000 megabytes, which is where I'm speaking from. I remember 2 years ago, Christmas time, we had here 17 people, everyone connected to Wi-Fi, and no problem whatsoever, did not collapse. So I would say take at least 500 megabytes. You're speaking a difference of around €3 from 200 to 500. So I think it's worth it, because if you go to update the speed afterwards, they're going to charge you a bit more. So might as well go for the 500 megabytes and have peace of mind.
Okay. So going on to costs then for a typical cell phone plan, what would that look like?
So I'm looking at I have here a small chart here, so I can normally I reply this on email so people understand. When people click on that link that he's put here in the chat, James, and then when there's a few details that are asked, I then send all these prices, but just so you have a general idea. Let's suppose the 500 megabyte home internet speed plan with one cell phone line, one SIM card, with 10 gigabytes of traffic on that SIM card, you're looking at around $62.99. If you're looking at, let's say, for example, 1,000 megabyte home internet plus the same 10 gigabytes on the SIM card, you're looking at around $66.99. And then if you want to do, to me, probably the best plan, which is what I have, let's suppose 500 megabyte home internet and one SIM card with unlimited data, unlimited traffic, so where you're out and about, you're looking at a cost here of $81.99.
Okay. So 81.99 is about about 89 US dollars at the moment.
Exactly. And that's with home internet and one cell phone line, unlimited data, unlimited calls and text messages, two Portuguese numbers only.
Okay. And I noticed there that you've put the two on the same package. Does it make sense to, do everything at once and get your mobile phone and your internet together?
Yes, in terms of billing, it's easier for you. You don't have to have two separate bills. You're going to end up having a bit of better prices joining things together. So it always makes sense to put everything together on the same package. And if you go for the lower data, let's suppose you choose a package with one SIM card that has 10 gigabytes of data, and you have a family of 4 people. If you join those four and you request 4 SIM cards along with the home internet with home fiber, instead of 10 gigabytes, the operators multiply the base 10 gigabytes of data on each SIM card by the number of cards. So the 4 SIM cards would have 40 gigabytes each instead of 10 gigabytes at exactly the same price.
Okay. Well, that sounds like it makes a lot of sense to go down that route then.
Yes.
Now you mentioned that there's three internet service providers in Portugal, and they are Mayo, NOS, and Vodafone. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, those are the three major operators which here we work with. So those are normally the operators that everyone uses here every day.
So one question that came in that we might as well answer now is, could you transfer internet from another company outside Portugal, like AT&T in the US, to Portugal?
That's something we don't deal with here. Some of my clients have used Google Fi and other services, but here the operators cannot transfer an American number into a Portuguese number because you are assigned a Portuguese number there, so that we cannot transfer numbers from another country.
Okay. And in terms of those three providers, which do you have a preference in terms of them? If I'm getting, say, 500 megabytes or a gigabyte internet with each of them, is there a difference in terms of speed or quality of service?
No, as long as they're providing fiber, they are all the same. I can't say one is better than the other. The only operator, which sometimes we a bit cautious with, which is NOS, which when some areas, even though they advertise as fiber, they have fiber with a coax cable, which the speed can drop a little bit, and they're still considering it fiber. But when I send those options, I'm very careful. And when I say there's fiber, it's fiber with fiber optical cable. Then not all operators have fiber at each address. For example, in a city, let's suppose Lisbon or Porto. Sometimes I send the options, and then people think, well, can I not have instead of NOS have Mel or Vodafone? It depends, because each operator owns their own infrastructure. Therefore, it can be very common that one operator has fiber and the others don't. So basically, as long as they have fiber, they're all good. When you're renting, that's a bit different, because if you're leasing a property and then you're going to change, let's suppose 6 months down the road or 1 year, change to a different address or buy a property, it could happen where that new property might not have fiber. And currently in Portugal, the biggest operator in terms of size and network availability is Mel. Mel has around 80 to 90% of the fiber infrastructure. So if you are buying a property, very likely, and if you're renting a property, sorry, it's easier if you go with Mel in the sense that if you go to transfer your service at a later date, they're very likely have fiber at the address you're buying or you're renting. Because imagine you go with Vodafone or NOS, for example, and you then go to transfer the service to a new address, and then they don't have it, and you bundle everything up. What they're going to do is they're going to cancel the home part of your contract without penalty, but then you're going to be stuck with your mobile phones, your cell phones, which you have to pay at a higher rate. So normally, if you're renting, I would say go towards Mail, gives you a bit more options. If you're buying, all of the operators are good.
Okay. I think that's very good advice, because a lot of people, when they move to Portugal, initially, they don't quite know where they're going to settle. They think it's probably going to be in this town, but it might be in another part of the same region or another part of the country altogether. And so if you should think about that flexibility. If you are going to end up moving in a year or two, which company is going to be best to bring with you? And it sounds like Mayo is the best choice here.
Yes, yeah, if you're renting, yes, because that means they're going to have the greatest probability of having fiber at the new address. If you're buying, it's simple. You can go with any operator. If you're renting, be very cautious. In some areas of Portugal, you might not have all three operators, and then you're stuck trying to change the service to a new address, and it doesn't exist.
One thing that I will just mention that you brought up there is you said that some companies will advertise that they have internet in a specific area and then you find out they don't. And this is exactly why we set up the form that we did, which I've put in the chat. Because what happens is you can go on a website for one of the internet service providers or for a price comparison site, and you put in your address and your postcode, and it'll tell you that you have internet in Portugal. But when you actually look into it, it isn't always the case. You find out that you don't have it. So can you tell me sort of why that is, Fernando?
It happens a lot. I've had both cases, clients coming to me saying, Fernando, I don't have fiber, I can't get fiber, and then I can, or the other way around saying I have it and then you don't. Why is this? When you search on an operator's website or those comparisons, what do? They simply ask you for the postcode, your zip code, as we would call back in North America. What's going to happen is we have to understand one zip code can have literally 7 or 8 streets. And let's suppose your street can be one of those streets that doesn't have fiber. So that's why on the form James put, he specifically asked for the details I asked him when we first met, that I always need preferably the client's name, of course, email so I can reply back, if possible, the contact number. So we can, sometimes it's easier to have a quick chat, faster and more efficient than emails back and forth. And then very important, the full address, which is street name, door number, and the city, plus the postal code. And then finally, which really gives me the ultimate detail, is the GPS coordinates. Because what happens is here, unfortunately, in Portugal, one utility company can call street A door number 2, but the other utility company can call that street B door number 2. So with the GPS coordinates, I can open the system, I can check that house, and it tells me how that's called on that operator's facilities system, how they have it labeled, and that way there's no doubt. So please always try to put the GPS coordinates. When in the city, not too bad. When in rural areas, sometimes always put it in. And that's why you'll find very different information. An operator can say, we do have fiber, but then that's not on that specific street. So you should always ask with the exact street and coordinates. And the operators, they will not online, they'll not be checking the coordinates. That's why it's different between an automatic system online, which gives you back the results. Someone here behind this, physical person, human being, checks manually with the coordinates to make sure we're all fine.
Yes, so that has been really helpful for people to get a specific answer. Do they have internet in the property that they're looking at? Because it can be very confusing. You can see that, yes, they serve this area, then you go and find out that they don't. So I am very grateful for that. It seems like quite a very low-tech solution, having a human actually physically doing it in the background. But honestly, of all the websites that I've looked at in Portugal, this is the only one that actually works. So low-tech solutions aren't that bad after all. So supposing, and this does happen sometimes, that people can't get fiber internet at the property, they have what's called satellite or 4G internet instead. Can you tell me a little bit about what that looks like?
Obviously, the goal here is always having fiber. What we call the satellite, different with people. The satellite is because the satellite dish is used for the TV channels. Then we have the 4G, which is nothing more, nothing less than having a 4G data SIM card, putting in a router with unlimited traffic. Obviously, that has not as good speed as fiber. That's very understandable. And even though the operators say, and normally what's on contract, that on the 4G contracts, the speed goes up to 40 megabytes, on the replies I put to clients that only have 4G, they know I'm very harsh in the sense I'm very down to earth in reality. You get an average of 10 to 15 megabytes. You have to be in a really good location to get more than that on a 4G connection. And I say 10 to 15 because of a precise, let's say, scientific reason here. If you're way below 10 megabytes, on the day the technician is installing and doing some speed tests, imagine he sees you have 6-7 megabytes. He tells the client, I will only have your 6-7 megabytes, and he'll probably won't even install it. So normally, as of 10 megabytes, I'll be more of a stable connection. People ask, is that enough? You can survive on it. Obviously, on a 4G home internet solution, probably won't be able to have 3 or 4 people streaming at the same time. That's for sure. One person easily doing a Zoom call, streaming Netflix, if you have 2 people at the same time, YouTubing, Netflixing, it might not be enough. But then unfortunately, there's not much we can do on it. When you're in a very rural area and there's no fiber available, as we say, it is what it is. People speak of another solution, which is Starlink. Now, I do not work with Starlink. I don't know how they work. So some people I have had mixed reactions back from people. Some clients have said, we tried here in a rural area, Starlink, it's worked good. I've had people saying, we tried Starlink, it's even worse than the 4G you were suggesting. So I don't know what would be like Starlink, but some people could go down that road. Fiber is fiber. With 4G of the Portuguese operators, it's around 10 to 15 megabytes.
Okay. And this 4G, it's slightly different than, I mean, it's the same internet that comes into your phone, but there is a box on the outside of the property, right, which makes it easier for it to pick up the signal.
Yes, Vodafone does not do 4G home solutions, only Mel and Nosh. And in terms of satellite, what I always tell people on the replies, if let's suppose I find a property in rural Portugal, which there's no fiber, what do I always recommend on the email is get a Nosh data SIM card, get a Mel data SIM card, and do speed test, see which one has the best coverage there, because that I can't see on system here. I can see there's a tower in the area, for example, but they'll never tell me the actual speed. And then what the advantage Mel has in relation to Nosh is that imagine that inside the house you have a house with good insulation, thick stone walls. You will never get a good 4G signal in. Then in that case, Mel authorizes and has the technicians put an exterior router where they put the SIM card outside, which will probably get a better signal. And then they hardwire a cable into the internal router, which supplies it. And then on 4G, I always recommend something else. On fiber routers, even with Wi-Fi, you're going to get a good signal. But on the 4G, since already weaker speeds, you should always use an Ethernet cable to connect from the router directly to your computer, to your laptop, because that way you're going to get full speed without losing, because that's something else we have to understand in technology. When an operator says we give you 1,000 megabytes on fiber internet, that's with a cable connection from the router to your computer. On a Wi-Fi, very rarely will you get that full speed. I have 1,000 megabytes at home. My laptop, it's around 3 years or so. I only get 100 megabytes. But if I connect it with the cable, I get the full 1,000 megabytes. Of course, the 100 megabytes by Wi-Fi is more than enough. And then when we're speaking here on a 4G connection, it's very, very important and vital you do that, because if you connect with the cable, you're going to get the maximum performance, because with Wi-Fi, you can use a little bit more than what you already are on a 4G connection.
Okay. So it's worth people getting an Ethernet cable to plug into their computers
correct.
as well. And in terms of, you were talking about thick stone walls, which is a common feature in old houses in Portugal. Yes. Is there anything else that people can do to sort of increase the Wi-Fi around the property?
Yes, it's very common. People install fiber, for example, especially, and say, oh, but I don't have Wi-Fi coverage on the whole property. That's normal. No operator can guarantee, even putting a Wi-Fi 6 router, we're going to have coverage throughout the whole house. If you have a 200 square meter house, for example, my house here, literally it's around 18 meters from one end to the other. I have my router on one end, and basically on the opposite end, 18 meters, speaking of around 60 feet away, I still get Wi-Fi, but at a weaker signal. What can you do for that? You put, people know, a mesh network or power lines where to help spread the Wi-Fi signal throughout the property. And that's always the best solution. Even though the operators, they do sell Wi-Fi spreaders, I recommend to not use them, because you might as well buy them on your own at a tech shop and have an independent technician come and install it. You're going to end up paying cheaper prices and probably have a better deal set up. So put the main router in, supplies the fiber, and then put spreaders out. Obviously, repeaters. As you have, on the moment you're having internet installed, it's always the question or the debate with the technician, where to leave my router. I always say, some people say in the middle of the house. I have another opinion. I think it should be left in an area of the house where you pass the majority of the time, or where you normally are online. For example, if we have on one end of the house a few bedrooms, and then on the other end you have the living room, the kitchen, the office is probably where we work a bit more, then it makes sense to put the router where we spend more time, not physically in the middle of the house. If you don't, imagine you have a hallway at the middle of the house where you come in. If you're not working there, it doesn't make sense to leave the router. So with the technician on the day, try and see the best location to get the best coverage.
Okay. So I'm just going to recap quickly one thing that you said, just because I know we're talking about a lot of technical things here, just to make it simple. So the first thing, if I'm correct, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the first thing before you rent or buy a property is ideally to check, is there internet first there? Is there fiber internet first?
For sure, do that. When you're renting a property, okay, you can probably do it in time, but I have seen people, and I remember a story last year, someone buying a property in the Algarve in Portimão. paid 800,000 euros. And then poor man asks me, can you check if there's fiber? When I start checking, I kind of lost myself. I said, how can I tell him he does not have fiber? I said, sorry, you only have 4G. And he answers me, so you're telling me I bought a property of 800,000 euros, lovely setting, by close to a beach, and I don't have fiber? The estate agent said I did. I said, well, yeah, you should double check that. So especially when you're buying a property, double check it, please, because you don't want to be doing a massive investment and then realize you don't have fiber. Then you can cope with satellite, but you might as well check that first. Just you never bother me. I try to reply within 1 to 2 days. Sometimes people really try to pressure a lot, but I do answer as soon as I can and get back to you. At least have an answer. When you're in a city, you're fairly good, which isn't that bad. But especially in rural areas, always double check. Just click the form James has, ask the question, I'll come back to you. You might as well lose 1 day than try and having a whole sale going wrong.
Okay. And in the unfortunate event that you don't have fiber, you mentioned that you would get 2 SIM cards, which are the, did you say it was Mayo and Noj?
Yes, they do what we call the 4G package, yes, where they put
Okay.
that 4G data SIM card, correct.
So would that be like a prepaid or a pay-as-you-go SIM card, and you just put a couple of euros on each one and just try them both out?
Yes, exactly. Just buy. So I was understanding your question. I understood. Yes, if you have a 4G, before we do a contract, because it's difficult to know what speed, might as well just buy like two pay-as-you-go SIM cards, probably 20 euros each with some data. Do some speed tests. When you're doing speed tests, if you don't have fiber and you're trying to test the 4G, remember to do the speed test during various times of the day. During the morning is always the best speed because hardly anyone is online. Mid-afternoon, this time, 6, 7, 8 p.m. after dinner, prime time, everyone is online. So whatever speed you get on 4G after dinner, let's say prime time, is going to be the lowest speed you're going to get there. So that's an idea what you're going to have eventually if you proceed with the 4G contract. Of course, we then have other variables such as weather. If we have a massive storm outside, heavy rain, heavy wind, of course, the speed could eventually drop a little bit. But on an average usage, try a few tests before subscribing, as I recommend myself. I never like to say, just do it right now with Mel or Naj. No, do the speed test and then let me know what you thought.
Okay. And just one question on that, because you were talking about sort of prime time in the evenings. I've heard people say that during sort of the months of August, places like the Algarve that get a lot of tourism, the internet quality goes down because of the number of people. And I've always wondered, is that a myth or is that true?
No, it's true. It's very simple. We physically build a tower, what we call for people. When I'm saying a tower, is obviously that metal infrastructure where all the 4G is and the 5G is off. Of course, when they do that, with the operators, they look locally at the statistics, and see that there's an average of, for example, 30,000 people in that area, for example, in a small radius. And if all of a sudden that doubles or triples in the summertime because everyone is there, of course, that tower, the speed is going to lower a little bit. So it is a reality during the summertime. That's why when you have fiber, the speed does not affect. This is a myth people have, for example, with fiber. Oh, after dinner, it's so no. Fiber is always guaranteed speed. 4G can fluctuate on a lot of variables, including weather outside and the number of users. So yes, when we had, for example, during COVID and when everyone was at home, all the students and all the kids at home, we noticed a lot of difference on 4G connections where it was coming down quite a bit.
Okay. Now, there's a few people who are moving to places like Madeira and the Azores, the Portuguese islands. Is there a difference in terms of, firstly, in terms of costs, and secondly, in terms of speed in those places compared to mainland Portugal?
First of all, in terms of islands, and if there's any doubts, yes, I work with the islands too. I can do any contract in mainland, the Azores, or Madeira. The cost, there is a minor difference in cost, not what the operator charge. It has to do with the government taxes, because here in mainland Portugal, we have a 23% general sales tax, which everyone, we know what it's included in the price. When you go to Madeira, it's only 22%. And when you go to the Azores, it's 16%. So obviously nothing huge. You can have a minor difference of 2 to 3 euros per month. Not the operator is not charging less. The taxes are different. So that's why you're going to pay a little bit less. In terms of the service, it is exactly the same. If you have fiber on the islands, it can be the same as here. I've been to Madeira. I've been to the Azores and I found the 4G networks brilliant. Again, they're small islands. They have a fairly good 4G network or 5G in the bigger cities, and then obviously not as crowded as the mainland. So they're going to have a good quality there. Do not be afraid. You can get in touch and don't think you're going to be on the island with, no, you're not going to be lost like Survivor style. No, you're going to have a good service there, and I've found it myself.
In terms of contracts, then, am I right in saying that most contracts, or the typical contract in Portugal, is 2 years in length?
Yes, correct. They are 2 years. What happened about 3 years ago or so? European Union, a lot of pressure here on the Portuguese government to crack down on the operators to give 1 year contracts. What happens here? Technically, the companies, the operators have 1 year contract, but what they do is, let's suppose you're, for example, you're paying a certain amount on a 2 year contract. The 1 year contract they provide is literally double the amount you're paying on a 2 year contract. So in practice, after 1 year, you've paid the same as if you were doing a 2 year contract. And on a 1 year contract, you're obliged to pay the installation. When you have fiber or 4G internet installed at home, the installation of the internet, the activation of the internet, and the equipments are completely free on a 2 year contract, always. And they guarantee the equipment. Imagine after a few months, your router stops working, you don't have internet. It could happen. You call the helpline, they replace the router free of charge. They replace the TV box free of charge. That's included. On a 1 year contract, they charge installation, which could be around an average of 2 to 250 euros. Therefore, it always makes sense to do the 2 year contract. And now that James touched this issue here, explain a bit when people ask, well, what happens, Fernando? I signed a 2 year contract today. I'm thinking of buying a property because I'm renting now or moving somewhere else. I'm seeing where I want to live in Portugal. What happens? Are there penalties? Yes, there are penalties applied. What are the exceptions? You are allowed to change. Imagine you go to a specific address today, you do the 2 year contract. 6, 8 months, 1 year, whatever, down the line, you change to a different address. You can change the service to a different address. The operator normally there charges you around 25 euros for that change of address, so something simple. And then a new 2 year contract starts at the new address, but at the old address where you currently were, no penalty is applied there. Also, another situation, people say, well, Fernando, I'm here in Portugal. I'm seeing how things are going to work. Don't know if I have to go back to America, to Canada, no problem. If for any reason something happens in life where you don't, I've seen things happen, or professionally or personally, you have to move back. Even recently, I had a client move back to America. He had some health issues with a family member, serious health issues. They will cancel the contract free of charge as long as you prove generally you are permanently moving. Obviously, you can't say I'm going to move away just to try and get away with the penalty. If you've proven what do they ask? And that I don't deal with. It has to be at the shops of the operators. They're going to ask you for a work contract of a different country, a rental contract, so something proves you are permanently moving. They cancel the contract, no penalties paid, and you started. So at the end here, we do have 2 year contracts. People become a bit worried, but at the end of it, there are tools to get around those 2 year contracts. And if you are generally staying here, you're not going to be paying a penalty on that, because you can either move your service to a new address, or if you relocate back to your home country, they're going to cancel your contract free of charge.
And what happens if I take out a 2 year contract and with, say, Vodafone, and then I move to a new address and they don't serve that address?
There. Here's where we have the small issue I was speaking initially about. So you're with Vodafone in an address in Lisbon, for example, and in that neighborhood on that block, they had fiber. You're going a bit far away, they don't have fiber anymore. If you only have a home internet contract only, simple. They cancel the contract and you never pay penalty. Now, imagine you have a bundle, home internet with 2 or 3 cell phone lines. What they're going to do, they're going to cancel the part of the home internet contract, and then you have to keep the cell phone lines with them. What's the problem? They then have the right to grab the cell phone lines and they're going to raise the price to the normal price. Because when you're doing a bundle, what you are paying for the cell phone lines is always cheaper than having them separate. So then when you move to a new address, there isn't fiber there, then you're going to cancel the home internet part of it, but you're still stuck with the cell phone lines and without the discounts applied, then you're going to pay the regular price. So that's why when you're renting, be very careful. And that's why I say, and I'm not saying, and people think, oh, I don't receive more from one or the other. It's exactly the same. I don't prefer one or over the other. They're all good, but it's what statistics show. Mail has the biggest fiber infrastructure. And when we're speaking of someone who's renting a property, I always recommend going with mail to safeguard you down the line. You're buying the property, okay, you're probably not going to sell the property, so you're fine. Then you can take any operator. If you're renting and searching around, be very careful and wise with that.
Okay. And then there is a question then someone's asking if they get a broadband or home internet installed in their property and they decide to leave Portugal for say 6 months or something like that. Is it possible to pause a contract or will they continue paying it while they're away?
That is not. No, if you go away for 1, 2, 3, 4 months, you still have to keep on paying. As I was explaining, the only way you can cancel the contract without a penalty is if you prove you are permanently moving out. Then they will cancel the contract. If not, unfortunately, you have to keep on paying the contract.
So from what I gathered there, just to summarize, your recommendation is generally to go with the 2-year contract, just because even though you can get a lower contract, there are a lot more costs involved and you can generally move anyway. Yes. And Mayo is the better one overall because of their fiber coverage and also their mobile phone coverage, which is where you could end up being caught on costs.
Exactly, yes. In terms of the mobile phone network, I'll say they have similar coverages there. And people also, you bring up an important point, 5G. 5G is available. We have it in the bigger cities. I can say as a fact, and if James, he's also traveled around a bit across Portugal, very rarely will you find 3G networks. And many North Americans say, oh, I'm still on 3G. Here, even when you're in a rural area, you're going to be on a 4G. And in the cities, you have 5G. So on all the cities, we have 5G. Some people ask, well, why isn't there enough 5G throughout the whole country? Because what the European Union decided, what they regulated was that here across Europe, the operators were mandatory. They install 5G towers, reception equipment on high density populated areas. If they are in a low density area with low population, it doesn't make sense for them to obviously spend loads of money for 2 reasons. First of all, not enough of a financial return because obviously very few people. And second of all, in the low populated areas, rural areas of Portugal, the majority are elderly people who do not even use probably internet. So therefore, that's what they stipulate. So yes, I would say Mail in terms of if you're renting and looking to move a few months down the line. If you're buying, go ahead. Any of the operators are good. And in terms of network coverage, they're very similar. If people ask, I am a Vodafone client myself on a cell phone line, have been a Vodafone client for about 20 years now. Home internet, always been Mail, no problem whatsoever there. And here where I live in central Portugal, just to let people know, in a rural area, and Mail is the only operator with fiber. So I went with Mail. I have my existing cell phone with Vodafone there. So they're all fairly good coverages.
Okay. And in terms of problems that people might experience with an internet service provider, just in general, what are the sort of problems that come up in Portugal? In
general, for example, you're out of internet, something happened. Let's suppose bad weather, a technical glitch. And some people in the forest fires, for example, fires or floods. Well, what do? You call the operator, and this is that brings me to another point. People ask, well, do I really need a Portuguese cell phone line? You should have a Portuguese number, or you have your landline, because for one reason, if you need to call the operator, their technical support from a foreign number, it's difficult to get through. If you have a Portuguese number, it's easy for you to call them, and they can call you. So if you have an issue, they have 24-hour helplines. They have English-speaking staff. Yes, they do. Don't worry. Obviously, we're very used to foreigners here. Everyone speaks a bit of English. And then when you might have to wait a little bit until they pick up. And then even if they don't speak English, you say, do you speak English, please? They'll automatically pass them to a colleague, and then they'll help out. Normally, the issues are around that. Or then again, if the equipment isn't working properly, they'll come and they'll book a technician to come. So normally, those are the small issues. Eventually, issues with billing, many people ask. I haven't had many issues with billing there. Eventually, when you install it, they could probably join the first 2 bills together there. But apart from that, nothing major. People sometimes are a bit panicked how things work back in North America, excessive cost. I really don't have any complaints and experience over the years, nothing too major on that. Small things which easily can be sorted out with their helpline. And when I see people sometimes either on a blog, on Facebook, speaking this and that, and with issues, I ask myself, have they called the operator? If they haven't called the operator, try calling them first. I mean, it kind of like makes sense. It kind of like if you're in a marriage and you have an issue, you don't speak with your partner, speak with your partner first before taking ultimate resolution. So kind of like that way, always speak ask them, and they are there 24 hours a day. If I can help, yes, obviously, I try to reply to everyone. I'm always happy if someone gives me a message, or my internet isn't working, something's wrong. What should I do, Fernando? And I'll tell them the helpline, who they should call, how they should do it. So I can give them some pointers out in that direction, which is a bit of this after sales service, which people like about me, giving them some advice different from when you're dealing directly with the operator, because you don't learn these small tricks. So I'm here. Just like something else, when you're installing a service, for example, and you don't have the Portuguese number, they can't help you out with the installation. They can't do the contract. With me, someone gives me their foreign number, and then I put my number so that the technicians can call me, and I can help go through the installation a little bit easier. Speak to the technician, he's on his way. I say, yes, the client is there waiting for you. You can go, or the house is here, the house is there. That's why I also ask for the coordinates. In a city, you're fairly fine. Imagine in a rural area where you are lucky enough and you have fiber, and the technician calls, you know where the house is. Then I can easily send the coordinates by message, and he can arrive there. So I always give my number out to help with the installation, and not simply here to do the contract, sign, receive the commission, and I'm lost. No, I'm here to help you from beginning to end and on the installation date. And people who have worked with me, they know how I am. I am here to help. I'm not only here to earn money, I try to make a friend out of every client. As long as the client wants to, that's the way I see things. I don't want to abandon people. I don't want to feel they're an object here just for money to be made. We're here to all to help each other. I think that's the way to make sense. At least that's my perspective on life, and professionally has always been.
Okay. And I think that that service is very, very helpful when you are getting set up. You've just moved to Portugal. You probably don't really speak Portuguese. You might not know the words for internet-related things in English, never mind in Portuguese. So, and then the question comes up then is like giving your address. Often in rural areas, what some people moving to Portugal don't realize is there aren't really addresses sometimes in the same way as there are in other countries. A lot of the streets in Portugal are marked as unnamed roads. And so you very often end up having to give out your address to people, but more in an explanation over the phone, where you say it's down the road and it's past this tree, and then you take a left at this. And so if you already have the GPS coordinates and you've been handling that and are able to communicate with them, that makes things so much easier.
I'll give an example of a section of Portugal I love to go there on holidays, but it is a nightmare with addresses, the Algarve. And it's very difficult because they're not too accurate. The Algarve has grown quite a bit, and then street names are being changed quite a lot, and it's difficult. So in the Algarve, I always need to have GPS coordinates to make sure if there's fiber, and for the technician to find his way around. And then also going back to installation day, people ask, do the technicians speak English? They'll speak a little bit, some more, some less. But if you're stuck with something during installation, the technicians have my number. They can give me a bill, and I will happily help over the phone with translation. So I'm here to help.
Okay. Well, yes, I think people will probably be surprised, but it's good information to know about the Algarve, because the Algarve, you think of it as being quite developed because it's got so much tourism there, but it can be quite surprising that some of the things like the lack of addresses.
I can see, for example, let's suppose on the same building, for example, in a city, let's say in the Algarve, for example, in Albufeira, you can have NOS with one address, Vodafone with the other, and Mail with another. And each operator calls that building a different name, and even different from what City Hall puts on the water bill. So it can be really confusing. And that's why I'm so keen on coordinates. People ask, how can I get the GPS coordinates? For people who aren't used to it, very simple. You open Google Maps. If you can zoom in, find the property, right click with your mouse on top of it, it's going to have a long combination of numbers. That is the GPS coordinates. Or for someone who can go a bit further, when you right click, you simply put share this link, and then automatically that'll generate a link to me, which I can click and automatically opens it up. So that's very important for you to get the GPS coordinates.
Okay, perfect. And now moving on to phones, because I know a few people have asked, do I need a Portuguese phone number while I'm there? And you touched on that it is useful. I would say yes, you do need one. You'll find that a lot of people won't actually call you, because for them they'll be calling an international phone number, which is either going to cost them or they mightn't actually be able to do. So you really do need to have one. But what about people who are, you know, you moved to Portugal and you've got 4G internet. you're still going to be using WhatsApp for most of your conversations.
Exactly.
Is it possible to sort of get a dual SIM or an eSIM or something like that, so you can receive Portuguese calls, but you've still got another SIM that, you know, gets your text from your old bank account or WhatsApps from family and friends, etc.?
For sure, it is the most popular practice foreigners have. They come with a dual SIM mobile phone, a cell phone. They have their, for example, a North American number and the Portuguese number. Then what do they do to try and save a little bit from their carriers back home in North America? They will turn the data off of their American carriers. They will use their Portuguese number and turn the data on of the Portuguese number, so that your cell phone will exclusively work on the data of the Portuguese provider, and then you can use your WhatsApp and all FaceTime, everything without any issues. That's what a lot of people do. Keep the American number. I mean, literally, I find almost everyone is contacted, whether on Facebook, on WhatsApp, on Teams, so the Telegram. Everyone has some type of social network where we can do free calls. So it's always the best way to go. And for sure, as James was saying, have a Portuguese number always makes sense. If you don't want to put in the bundle, if you just want something simple, at least get a pay-as-you-go SIM card, which you can get at a shop, to at least have a Portuguese number available. And don't forget, it's the question of someone, Portuguese person or a company calling you on an international number. It'll cost them something like 80 cents to €1 per minute. I know a lot of technicians, when they're on their way, they will not even call an international number. And I've seen cases, people trying to get through, but they only had their international number on file, they couldn't call. So always get a Portuguese number, even if it's just a simple pay as you go, at least for you to receive the calls. Always makes full and complete sense.
Okay. And speaking in terms of, we mentioned two things there. We mentioned a dual SIM and then we mentioned eSIM. Can you explain just briefly what those two things are?
Obviously, dual SIM there. I'm not that good at technology at explaining, but here I'm more of a practical person. What a dual SIM we call is a cell phone which has the capacity to have two SIM cards, two cell phone lines at the same time. It is possible. Some people bring their cell phone from America, which is possible, as long as that phone is unlocked. Very important. You have to check with your North American operator, ask them directly, is my phone unlocked? And then see what the costs are. If they are good, if they're unlocked, you can come here, put a SIM card, it'll work perfectly. If it's locked, because it's a cell phone belonging to the operator, what are you going to do? Two things: either you buy the cell phone in North America and bring it here, or you buy it here. Personally, I think it makes sense to buy it here. If you're going to move here and you're going to spend obviously the rest of your life here, at least quite a long time, probably in terms of warranty, it won't make sense to buy a phone back in North America, have a technical issue, and then you can't have a technical support or warranty support. You might as well buy it here. There are many tech shops here. People ask, some like Vorten, the biggest retail shop. Let's compare, imagine a Walmart, but only here for technology. So all applying to technical gadgets. You have Fnac, you have Media Market, there, Radio Popular. There are major shops here which sell technology. So they have the same equipment and prices very similar. eSIM, what is an eSIM? The cell phones either take a physical SIM card, as we have all been used to for many years, where you put it into the slot. The more modern cell phones now have stopped the physical SIM, and we have an eSIM, an electronic SIM. How does that work? The electronic SIM here, you get them at the shop. Once you subscribe to the plan, you arrive, and then once the installation is done, you go to the shop and they give you an eSIM. So you can have both technologies. There are even some phones which have, especially I think on the iPhones, many clients, I have a Samsung phone personally, but many people have iPhones. They normally take an eSIM and the physical SIM. And then I normally find they're going to keep the eSIM of their American provider or Canadian provider, for example, and then they put the physical SIM of the Portuguese provider.
Okay. So that makes it easier for people to keep both phone numbers, and then people can look into what they need to do to keep their number active if they're coming from somewhere like the US, for example. It might be a case that you can just, you know, spend a little bit every couple of months just to keep the number active or something like that.
Exactly. Just for calls, because on your cell phone, as many people know, you can go to the definitions and you can tell the cell phone of which cell phone line you want the calls made, want the text messages sent, and especially which data. So you can tell on cell phone line 1, which is the North American provider, to receive calls only in text, and then off cell phone line 2, the Portuguese provider, I want it to supply the data, the data on here to the phone, and then it works brilliantly.
Okay. And if someone already has a cell phone plan in the US that they're paying for, can they use that in Portugal, or is that a case that it varies depending on the provider and the
You have
costs?
to ask your provider back home. Normally, as far as I've been told, they include roaming. I've heard people 10, 15, 20 US dollars per day, and they have international roaming. That could be a temporary solution. The issue is a lot of times when here in roaming, a lot of the comments clients tell me is that sometimes that roaming is a little bit weak. The cell phone, the internet data, the 4G signal isn't the strongest. So you can, I think it's always worth you getting a Portuguese line here ultimately to pass that. But always ask back home your operator, what are their charges in roaming? Here with our Portuguese cell phone lines, the way it works a bit in roaming to explain, you have the Portuguese calls and text messages. I keep saying text messages here because back in the US, for example, or in Canada, you can send a multimedia message, picture, via a normal message. That here is charged. So you cannot, if you send that here, you kind of have to try and lose that habit, or else you're going to pay 50, 60 cents each time you send a picture. How do you get around it? Send it by Facebook, WhatsApp, email. That's the way I do it there. Then when you're back to roaming, when you're in roaming, so you have your unlimited or 3,500 minutes and text messages and data included in Portugal and roaming across Europe. So if you have unlimited data, when you are roaming across Europe, then your data is capped down to 48 gigabytes, which is enough on a European trip. And when we say European roaming, we are technically saying European Union, the Schengen space, the 27 European countries, plus the UK currently still included. So England, Ireland, Scotland, plus Denmark, plus Sweden. Switzerland is not included there. And then when people say, what if I travel outside Europe back to America? Should I take my Portuguese number? No. I explain this very simply. Only use your Portuguese cell phone line outside Europe in case of life or death, because it is very, very expensive. I can tell you I had a client today. She went to America. She touched down, I think it was in Boston. She turned on her Portuguese phone just to quickly access some emails. She spent no more than probably, I think was, I checked her bill, 2 gigabytes of traffic. She paid, and she did 4 phone calls. She paid 250 euros. So this is what people have a clear idea. Expensive. If you're traveling outside Europe, the country where you land, buy a local pay-as-you-go SIM card and use it. That's always the best way to go.
Okay. That is very, very expensive. But yes,
it happens.
The good point that you touched upon there is that there is roaming across the EU, as you noticed. So as you mentioned, so it does make travel within Europe a lot easier, and especially if you're living close to the Spanish border and you're popping in and out for different things, you don't have to worry about it so much there.
I mean, James was speaking of, for example, of the coverage, the different coverages throughout Europe. I haven't traveled a lot here in Europe. I can tell you last year I went to Spain. My gosh, it was an experience. I was shocked, to be honest. I was used to the Portuguese coverage of network, 4G, 5G in cities. And in Spain, the speed was significantly lower, slower than it was here. I thought more of a country because it has a bigger population than Portugal. So that's why I say when we say in Portugal we have a good coverage, we do have a good coverage. Of course, if you're in the middle of the wilderness of a forest, of course, you're probably going to get less speed. We don't have, and I think no country, as far as I know, has perfect internet coverage throughout the whole country. But when you're on the Silver Coast, close to urban areas, main roads, they will have towers. It will work well. For example, we have a main motorway here in Portugal. Normally, so we have down in the Algarve, Faro, Lisbon, let's say more or less in the middle, and then Porto up north. And there's a main highway that links all those major cities up there. The other day I was traveling from Lisbon to Porto. I can tell you I had a WhatsApp conversation, so connected to data, during 1.5 hours on the main motorway, and I heard perfectly the client on the other. We had a long conversation, and the call did not call. So probably tell me which country you can travel in 1.5 hours on data without it collapsing. That's probably going to be difficult. So just to have an idea of how data here is fairly good, not perfect, but better than what other countries I've seen and experiences I've heard firsthand from people.
Okay. And for those people who are thinking about traveling within the EU, because I know a lot of people, when they move to Portugal, they think, well, while I'm here, I'm also going to spend time in France and I'm going to see Germany, etc. Is there a network or a particular plan that's best in terms to make sure you get the sort of maximum data for roaming?
All operators, they all work in roaming there. So they have contracts and agreements throughout. But again, as I like to say here, facts are facts. I don't want to feel this is a judgment, but here so we can understand. The only operator in Portugal that has its own network throughout the country is throughout the European Union is Vodafone. Vodafone is the big corporate company, so they have their network in Portugal, Spain, France, all the countries. How do Mel and Nosh do it? They partner up. For example, Mel or Nosh in Spain, each of them will work with one operator. For example, they go to France, they work with another operator. So that's the way it works. I've heard some feedback from clients saying that Vodafone, Mel has worked well, Nosh in some countries a little bit weaker, so it's difficult to see how it works, but facts are facts. Vodafone is the only provider that has its own network on each of the European countries. But again, I haven't had any clients saying with any of the three operators, I was in roaming and it was a tragedy, my service did not work. No, they've all worked, some a bit better signal, a little bit less. Again, I just had a client the other day, he was in northern Spain, but he was in the middle of the mountains. He said he had no signal whatsoever. But again, he did recognize I was at a very high point. I was in the middle of nowhere. So it's difficult for you to have some good signal when you're in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a forest.
Okay. I think that's definitely fair enough. And for those people who maybe are thinking about they start with one provider and then they decide to move to another Portuguese mobile phone provider, is it possible to keep your phone number?
Yes, you have your 2-year contract or your pay-as-you-go. However, then when your 2-year contract comes to an end or your pay-as-you-go phone, you can always do what we call portability. As long as your number is not under contract, your number can be ported onto the new operator, no problem. It happens a lot when people arrive here and they get at the airport a simple pay-as-you-go card to get them around, the cell phone line to get them around the first few days. Then they finally find them properly settled in. Say, Fernando, I've had this number for quite a few times. I've given it everywhere I opened the bank account. So can we keep this number? Yes, you can. You give me the number. There's a portability code I get. You fill out the forms, signing and requesting the portability. And then the new operator will give you their new card, and then your existing number will port onto that card. So yes, your number can be kept.
Okay, perfect. And we talked a little bit earlier with landlines, the fixed phone lines, and some of them offering international calls after 9 p.m. Is that the same with mobile phones? Do any of them offer international calls?
No, unfortunately, the mobile phones don't offer that.
Okay.
Then the operators normally have small add-ons you can do on a month-by-month basis. They change that, but that's why normally for the international calls, you have your landline, or again, you use WhatsApp, for example. Personally, what do I do? When I need to do a business call, let's suppose I need to call someone or a company, which obviously they won't be available on WhatsApp. I've used a solution that's worked brilliantly over the years, at least personally I found it, which is using Skype. I top it up with my PayPal account. I can tell you if I call a US number, a normal voice call, not a WhatsApp call, a normal voice call, I am charged 2 cents per minute, with the advantage that Skype allows me to go to the settings and put my number in so that if I'm calling, for example, James is in New York, I'm doing a normal voice call to James on his American number, and a call off my Skype app, sorry. When James receives that call, he thinks I am doing it off my phone on a normal voice call because it tells you the number calling is my number. So that's the way it works. So Skype works out very well. And they even have some plans you can pay on a monthly basis. So sometimes trying to look around Skype is still, even people forget Skype exists, but they're very good on that. Not only to call Skype users, but to do normal voice calls.
Yes, I think they got a little bit overtaken during the pandemic when everybody really started using Skype.
Yes.
So there's a question there about phones and whether a couple could share an account. So perhaps it's more the case that there's really only one person, they might need 2 phones, but there's, really only one person that uses the phone more than the other. Can you get 2 people put on the same plan?
In terms of on the same plan, when we do a contract, whether the home internet, the bundle, or cell phone lines, it can only be done in one name. So imagine we have 2 people and one partner needs unlimited data, the other partner only needs 10 gigabytes of data. Yes, that is possible. You can have one main SIM card, 10 gigabytes, the other one, unlimited data, the other one 10 gigabytes. Then depending on the special offers, they might have a special price, or you do independent contracts. So yes, you can have it, but not in the sense that you're sharing data. You can have, for example, let's suppose someone does unlimited data SIM card paying 50 euros per month, and then they have a special offer at 15 euros, and you have the 10 gigabytes. Yes, you can join both of them together.
Okay, perfect. And then someone has asked whether eSIMs have any restrictions in terms of data? If you get an eSIM, are you basically getting the same as if you got a physical SIM?
Yes, the eSIM is nothing more than nothing less than a replacement of the physical SIM. It is linked, it is programmed to the contract you have. So if your contract says you have 20 gigabytes of data and you had a physical SIM, and then you threw out your phone, you now bought a phone which needs an eSIM, continues exactly the same. The only issue with eSIMs, for people who are not used to eSIMs, what happens? You have a phone, you scan in the QR code, and your eSIM is installed. If you replace your phone, that eSIM is no longer valid. That QR code doesn't work. It's only valid for one equipment at a time. So when you buy a new phone, you have to be careful. Before you buy the phone, go to the operator, say, I need a replacement SIM card, and they'll give you a new QR code to install on the new phone. That's just the only small issue you have to be careful with eSIMs.
Okay. And then you've mentioned a few times sort of you can get unlimited data to a phone. And a lot of people know that you can turn your phone into a hotspot, and you can maybe connect a device like your laptop to it if you're working, and it can be a very useful thing when you're on the road and you need internet. Is that something that you could use as a permanent solution? Do the networks have any issues with you basically having a lot of data coming through because you're using a computer?
I have an unlimited cell phone line myself. And of course, when I'm outside the house and traveling, I do it a lot. A hotspot for my laptop, something else. And when people say, do I really need unlimited data if I'm normally around the house and I have unlimited traffic at home? I'll give a good example. We're going down to the Algarve or enjoy the hotels. And then at the hotels, we have to be honest, their Wi-Fi's are fairly weak. The speeds are very low. And I've had cases where if I hotspot my phone, I get a better speed than what the hotel is giving me or the accommodation where I'm staying at. So it's always good to have an unlimited data in that sense. What the operators say, it's unlimited traffic. They're on the cell phones, on the cell phone lines. However, they're very clear. They have the rights to cut your contract off or even give you a penalty for what they call abusive usage. And obviously the operators can see when your phone has a hotspot for one laptop, two laptops, okay. But I remember I heard a colleague of mine was saying a story in the Algarve about 4 or 5 years ago, a client with Vodafone. He, instead of paying, for example, fiber internet, he got a cheaper option with unlimited cell phone, and he would put his phone in the middle of the restaurant, and he would give the password so people can log on to the hotspot. Vodafone said, no, we've tallied 16 different devices. That even though it's unlimited traffic, that's abusive. So yes, you can use it, but obviously be conscious. For your personal use, no one will say anything. But if someone's trying to say connect 7, 8, 9 devices, we have to be honest, that is not a domestic use. Someone is using more than what is normal. Having an iPad, a laptop, 2 devices, okay, normal, but not having 6 or 7.
Okay. Now getting on to, well, just going back to data for mobile data, how much would you say that someone actually needs per month? You sort of recommended before that, if I remember correctly, that sort of at least sort of 500 megabytes for the home internet, because there's just a small price difference for speed, sorry. And then for mobile internet, the ideal thing is unlimited. But what would you say that the average person needs?
Well, obviously, the minimum of 10 gigabytes there.
Okay.
Because I've seen this experience with many people who I don't use a lot of data. The problem is, imagine this, you're coming to Portugal, you're learning and you're discovering the country you're going to travel around. You're going to need your GPS. So there, Google Maps, whatever Waze, whatever you're using. So automatically that's data. That'll consume a little bit. 10 gigabytes might not be enough. So 10, 20 gigabytes if you're taking 2 SIM cards, or ultimately, I still say it, if you can afford it, unlimited gives you peace of mind. And then we're going back to a technological question. What really uses a lot of data? Videos, films, games. The Google Maps won't use a lot. You can use it one day. It won't spend you like 10 or 15 gigabytes of data there. If you're doing downloads, apps like Spotify, you're downloading all those musics, those really use a lot of data. So be careful with that. And just one other fact. So when it comes to deciding price-wise, we're looking at a bundle with 1 SIM card or 2 SIM cards, 20 gigabytes of data each, and 2 SIM cards with unlimited data. If you spend your 10 or 20 gigabyte, whatever you have on your cell phone lines, and you need extra data, the operators will give it. Of course they will. But this so you have a clear idea on cost. If you pass your monthly limit on your cell phone lines, you will pay something like 15 euros for 1 gigabyte of data extra. So when people are discussing, okay, there's a difference of 15, 20 euros between 10, 20 gigabytes or unlimited data. If you keep on overgoing, you're going to realize I might as well have paid when I subscribed initially to have the unlimited data because it's cheaper. So, and at least you have peace of mind. And especially with children, I've seen many, especially families that have kids, this happens a lot. Watching like some cartoons, watching YouTube, Netflix, something else uses a lot, and then your data can just simply skyrocket. So think cautiously when you're thinking what data you need.
Okay. And then if someone gets to they've had their contract for 2 years, they get to renewal time. What happens at that point? Does it just start again? Do they get contacted by the company to ask if they want to renew?
There on the renewal, people ask me, I cannot do anything. We are only allowed to do the new contracts. When renewal time comes, the operator will contact you directly, normally from the call center, giving you an offer. They'll negotiate with you, or you can call them yourselves there. And then when I sometimes see, for example, prices raised a little bit, that's normal. And this brings to something else, actually. I'm just having a think here, which is if the prices are 2 years, we'll go back then a bit here. But regarding the renewal of the contract, imagine you initially started at one price, 38.99. After 2 years, the general prices have gone up. When you go to renew, people say, I'll just simply go to another operator. They forget something. The other operator will have a higher price for sure. And it makes sense if you keep with your current operator, try to negotiate with them and see the current offer they have. And people say, Fernando, is it worth changing operator? And I will give the same answer I've given for the past 10 to 12 years. If you're happy with what you have, why change? And I would be a happy person. The client comes back to me, Fernando, my contract has ended with me. I want to go now to Vodafone, or with Vodafone, I want to go back to NOS. If they were end a 2-year contract because it's ended and they do a new contract, I would have a new sale. But I say it doesn't make sense. If the internet has always worked well, they're happy with the service, what's the justification to go to a new contract? They're trying to make it 1 or 2 years cheaper. Is it because of that? And then they don't like the new operator or the way they work. They're so used to working with one operator. It's kind of like when you have a cell phone. If you're an iPhone fan, you're probably not going to like the way the Samsung works, or vice versa. So same thing here with contracts. If you're happy with it, they're going to contact you, they're going to renew it, and then it's convenient that people ask me, do I need to renew? Yes, because after the 2-year contracts, legally the operator is allowed to raise the price. You have ended your contract, you're out of contract, they can simply raise the price. That's why they always try to contact you to keep the price.
Okay.
We were also saying what I was going to add regarding here when we have here the 2-year contracts. Also, when people are saying, should I when you go to also to a different operator, imagine you find a different operator. Again, just to go back quickly, you can always do the portability of those numbers onto a new operator. There's no problem on that too.
Okay. So if you decide that it didn't work out with that one, or you move to a different area that doesn't have good coverage, you can take your Portuguese phone number to a new network.
And also, sorry, we're speaking about the prices. Yes, people ask me, is this a guaranteed price 2 years? The technical and correct answer is no. You do a contract and it's 38.99, for example, or 55.99. We say 2-year contract, correct. By law, the operators are allowed to raise the price once a year, normally at the beginning of the year, no greater than inflation. Now, what this kind of sounds like a discussion on the interest rates of the banks. We look back at the statistics and the history. For the past 3 years, the operators did not raise their prices. They did raise their prices this year. There was a lot written on here on Portuguese media. They raised their prices by 7.4%. They are allowed to do so. They did, and people say, oh, that's a 7.4% increase, correct. But the inflation was 10%. So since the raise was lower than inflation, nothing was illegal. It's written on the contract. And then obviously, I'm not defending anyone here, but obviously, if all the costs are raising for the companies, salaries and all that, they have to raise it. But they normally do not do it as a normal practice on every year. And even looking back at the past 10 years, when they do a small raise of, let's say, 50 cents, €1 per year. This year was 7.5%. Again, nothing like you're paying 40 euros and you're going to pay double. Nothing like that. Let's do a practical example. You're paying 40 euros per year. They raise 7%. That's a €2.80, €3 raise per month. Legal. So, and they're doing it below inflation. So that answers yes, they can raise it. They don't do it as a normal practice, only when they really have to do it.
Okay. And what about prepaid or pay-as-you-go phones? Are you able to get unlimited data with them, and how does the cost compare to a contract?
Yes, there. I myself, I don't work with prepaid cards, but the way the prepaid card system works is the following. Obviously, no contract, you just top it up whenever you want. There are plans on the market being sold as unlimited data, but be aware because they are technically unlimited data. But what happens is you get one of those pay as you go, and then normally after 100, 200 gigabytes of traffic, they're going to drastically reduce your speed. So they're not doing anything illegal because you still have unlimited traffic. What has changed is the speed. So that is why the contract is what makes sense to have the 2-year contract and guarantee truly unlimited traffic.
Okay. Now I'm just going to ask you, we've got one question from before about TV, and then I'm going to get to more of the questions in the chat.
Sure.
There's quite a lot there, so you'll have to.
And I've seen, yes, so we'll try the best we can here.
Let me know what. So just on one of the questions that came in before, are there TV packages which allow me to access, and this came from both British and American people, so either British TV or American TV?
The general packages here, they have normally around 150 TV channels on fiber, on 4G satellite, around 90 to 100 channels. I would say around half of them will have English speaking channels, Fox channels, Fox Life, Fox News, Fox Comedy, Fox Movies, AXN, Hollywood, National Geographic, MTV, some BBC, Sky News. So there, take a few more. There are quite a few. When clients ask, I have a document here on PDF where you can see the list of the channels. So you will have English speaking channels. People say, well, I have TV included free of charge, but there's no point. I only speak English. No problem. They are English speaking channels and you will be able to listen to them.
Okay. And these days also, most people will have Netflix or Prime or something else as well that they will be able to get access to a lot of TV. So I'm looking at the list of questions that people have asked because we're just getting onto those, and there's quite a lot. So
just run, please, if you run me through, James, and try to make out of those main questions, and then I'll try and answer them. Go ahead.
Okay, so someone is coming to Portugal now. He doesn't mention whether he's coming here to travel or move, and he has an unlimited plan in the US. He thinks it just goes from 5G to 4G. Is there any reason to get a physical or virtual SIM when he's in Portugal? And I guess the answer to that is probably, are you moving here or are you traveling?
Exactly. And again, if the change from 5G to 4G, I tell people, do not be nervous. We've all worked on 4G good, 5G a little bit faster, it's true, but we can all work on 4G perfectly. So unless the provider cuts the speed off drastically, unless if he's traveling, use his current plan. Moving go permanently, for sure, get a Portuguese line.
Yes, and if you are moving here again, Portuguese number is very, very helpful. It's not necessary. The reason is, as we mentioned before, people won't necessarily call it international numbers. And it's not just the person who comes to install your internet. The big one for people is couriers. So if you're getting a delivery from Amazon, they can't find your house. They quite possibly aren't going to phone you to tell you they can't find it if they see that it's an international number.
Because don't forget, when it comes to care delivery companies, the poor driver, he's getting his wage and he can't afford to be, imagine he has 10 deliveries to 10 foreigners. If he has to call each of those foreigners, and a 2 or 3 minute call, that's €3, you can see how much he can spend. So that's why they won't even call. So on a Portuguese number, they'll call. Foreign number, they won't call.
A couple of people asked if there will be a recording of this. Yes, as long as it goes through with no technical issues, I will send it out to everybody who registered. Do you have any experience? So one thing that people have issues with in terms of phone numbers is they need to receive text messages from their bank. So they'll need, if they're in Portugal, they need to receive it from the US or the UK or somewhere. If they're in the US, they need to receive it from Portugal for their Portuguese bank. Does that work well? Do people end up receiving the messages?
Yes, well, I mean, again, if you have, for example, you're in Portugal and you have a number connected to your bank account, you have your Portuguese number. If you're in Europe, it's roaming included, you'll receive the text messages, there's no cost for that. Now, if you're going over to America, I would say sort out your banking before you leave, but if you really, really need it, bring your Portuguese cell phone with your Portuguese SIM card, and only turn it on if you need it for the bank match. Imagine you're somewhere in America, you need to do a transfer from your Portuguese account to your American account, and turn your phone on, do the transfer, receive the message. You're probably going to pay €1 to receive that message, then turn it off again. So only turn it on if needed for banking.
Okay. And which documents do you need when you go to get something like home internet or a phone?
Normally on the email I reply to goes all the list of the documents that's required. Something like you're going to need a copy of your passport, which is needed. And before I start, people ask me, well, I'm very nervous sending documents. You can send it to me by email, by WhatsApp. It is all safely stored. Not that much of an issue here of information being stolen, not as much as in North America. Things are very safely guarded here. I have everything safe. I do not share with any other entity or companies the information. It is exclusively for the purpose of doing the contract, nothing else. I do not go and sell databases. That does not happen here. It's illegal by European law, and it's very specific what law states. We can receive the details, use them, and for no other purpose except for the operator. So you need a copy of your passport or your national ID card if you're coming from a European country. I need NIF number, fundamental. You don't do anything without a NIF number. If possible, the NIF number paper, the document, because it proves it belongs to you, because someone can just try and do fraud saying, here's my NIF number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That way it proves it's a NIF number of James. Then I'm going to need obviously the email address of the person. I need the full address of the property. I need the GPS coordinates again, first, so that there's no confusion or to even help the technician arrive on that day. I need a proof of address. What is it for proof of address? Proof of address can be rental contract, sales deed, another utility bill, for example, electricity bill. If you're already here for some time, that's enough. I will also need your bank details, because you always get a discount for doing direct debit and for electronic billing. So instead of your bill being sent in paper, it's sent to your email every month. With bank accounts for direct debit, many people ask, can I use my foreign bank account? Depends. Mail authorizes a foreign bank account, but I need the proof of your bank details, and it has to be an IBAN, so a European account. So you can use it. Let's suppose if you have an American bank in dollars, you can't use it. But normally people do have a Portuguese bank account. NOS and Vodafone, only Portuguese bank account. That's it. And then people ask, well, I have a Wise or Revolut account. Can I use it? Be amazed. Yes, you can. They give a PDF proof of their bank details. It has your name on it, your account holder, has the IBAN, the SWIFT code, and that can be used, no problem. And obviously your installation date. Tell me when you want internet installed so I can book it. And then normally I always ask for a contact number. I'll have the client's number, but have a number I can call on that day, or the client's number in case I need to get in touch. And it's convenient that when you arrive here, if you're going to, I'm going to call you on your American number, but you don't have roaming included because the data isn't working, try to get a local pay-as-you-go SIM card at the airport so you can be contactable. Imagine, and it happens many times, in a city, in a building, the technician is knocking on the doorbell, ring the doorbell, doesn't work. The technician called me, Fernando, we're here, the client doesn't open the door. If I can't get in touch with the client, I'm not physically there, the technician goes away. So try to be reachable by WhatsApp, or get a local Portuguese SIM card as soon as you arrive, if you cannot be reached on your WhatsApp when you arrive here in Portugal.
Perfect. So there's been a couple of questions where people have been asking about the provider names, because I guess they are a little confusing. I know Mayo sounds to people who've never heard it before, like Mayo, like mayonnaise. So Mayo is spelled M. Are you going to put it in the chat?
In the chat, it's probably easier for everyone.
Perfect.
So Mayo, NOS, and Vodafone. There.
Perfect. And the family plans, or that you can get for cell phones and mobile phones, does that include children as well?
Yes, you can get it, because when the contract is done, for example, done in the name of one of the adults, and then you can add as many cell phone lines as you want. For example, imagine it's a family of 4, 2 adults, 3 children. The SIM cards are all, the cell phone lines are all registered under one name only. Each member does not get it put into their name. And then whether you give your cell phone line either to a kid, to a toddler, or to an adult, that's up to you. It's under one name. You tell me how many cell phone lines you want, and then use it however you want.
Okay. There's been quite a few questions from people saying, can I bring my phone to Portugal and will it work there? And I guess the answer to that is probably it depends on the phone itself and on the network, if it's tied to one.
It has to be unlocked. Make sure if you bought the equipment outside Portugal, if you bought it unlocked, it's unlocked. If it's a phone you bought off an operator in your home country, ask the operator specifically First of all, is my phone unlocked? Yes. Second question, especially on more of the older equipments, is this equipment, this cell phone, compatible with a European SIM card? Yes or no? Because what happens is manufacturers, for example, iPhone, Samsung, Hawaii phones, they'll sometimes do only specific models for specific regions of the world. So you can have phones sold in America that will not take European SIM cards, and the opposite is true, a European mobile phone which will not take American SIM cards. So ask that question specifically. And again, I repeat this, if you're thinking of trading or buying a new phone before you move over, buy it here because of warranty. I've seen some nasty experiences of clients where they're stuck trying to get warranty. If you buy a phone here, it has warranty issues, you go to the shop here. You can imagine having your phone which stops working, a software issue. How are you going to do to get some help back in America? You're going to be stuck there a little bit. So try to avoid that.
Okay. And Fernando, you've got to let me know how good you are for time as well. So if you need to
I'm
go,
good.
just...
I'm good. I
Okay.
can do it.
In terms of 5G for data via sort of someone's asking whether you can get a portable internet solution for that. Is that possible? I know you mentioned that 5G coverage was in the cities.
Yes, you can get a portable hotspot, if you want to call it, on a pay-as-you-go. Obviously, people ask me, well, can I not use it for my home? If you want, sure. But then again, it's a question of speed. If you have fiber available at a home, it doesn't make sense to be working on a hotspot that gives you 10, 15, 20 megabytes when you can get 200 to 500 megabytes. Last week, I had actually was an American lady. She had an apartment she rented in Lisbon, and she was working on a 5G hotspot. And then she says, I have a Vodafone 5G hotspot. It works fairly well, 20 to 25 megabytes I can survive. But I mean, is it worth getting fiber? I said, listen, if you can afford it, it makes sense. She had fiber installed on Monday. She says, wow, Fernando, I cannot believe the difference in speed and stability. So if you can afford it, it doesn't make sense to be working on a hotspot unless you're trying to save some money. But then again, you don't have the same quality. It has nothing to do. And especially, and you can send an email, sure, but then when you want to watch a film, Netflix, that I can guarantee that on the 4G, you will not have, on the 5G, you won't have the same experience as on the fiber internet.
Okay. And there are a couple of questions about VPNs there, which, because I think when people start moving to other countries, they start hearing about VPNs and often aren't quite sure what they are. Do you know what they are, Fernando? Are you able to?
I'm not an IT specialist, I'm only more of a user, but basically the VPN stands for a virtual private network. From what I understand of the subject, it basically allows you, for example, imagine you have a streaming service in America, on TV channels, and then you come to Portugal. Normally that streaming service won't work here because it sees your IP address, your server is in Portugal. So people get that, what we call the VPN, the virtual private network, which basically doesn't allow the streaming service in another country to see where you're using it from. So they think you're still here in North America using it. That is something that I don't deal with. I always recommend, probably other friends or people online will say what they've used, ask around, go to shops, and they'll send you the same solution. They'll sell you a solution to have your VPN, to enable your VPN usage, so that then you can have a good service back home. People sometimes use Fire Sticks too. I've heard of that. Careful with this Fire Sticks, the server you're using. I've had a few situations, people very upset, my speed is down, the internet isn't good. I said, check with your Fire Stick provider. And then at the end of the day, they had to be switching their service. So careful with those services. You have someone who can help you, because a lot of times it has nothing to do with the speed. It's essentially to do with what VPN you're using. Something else people say is, can I use my own router? Yes. The operator always installs their own routers, always. If you want to connect another router to it, you are more than welcome. It is not illegal. The operators will not do anything about it. But then obviously, if you have an issue on your secondary router where the speeds aren't good, the operator will only give the technical support to their main router and say, yes, it's fine, the speed is being good. But yes, you can connect your own equipment to because the back of the router, you have a few slots where you can plug in Ethernet cables and additional routers. You can do whatever you want. If you're an IT specialist, I'm sure you can even explain more than what I am, but for sure, what people say, you can install your VPNs, install other equipments.
Yeah, I will say on the VPN thing, it is a little bit complicated. Most people, when they're talking about VPNs, they just want to be able to watch Netflix or Amazon Prime or something like that in the country that they're used to. The problem with that is that companies like Netflix, they don't want you doing that, and they've been cracking down on it. And so when people ask what's the best VPN, the answer is it's very difficult to say, and you really have to try out a few different ones. And that most of the articles that you read online are usually from someone that's promoting a VPN service that they make money from. If they're a mainstream VPN service, Netflix is probably very aware of them, and they're doing their best to try and crack down on it. So it is something that doesn't work as well as before, and you kind of have to play around with a few different companies to see if you want to look into that.
James says something essential. Many of the people who are they're simply trying to advertise and sell. Ask from personal experience. If you have someone on a Facebook post or saying, "Oh yes, mine works fine," is that your experience? Has it worked well on something? Oh, use this VPN. Has someone tried it before? So is there any recommendations? So be very careful with it, because when you do signing up to a VPN, as far as I know, they're not guaranteeing. They're giving you, oh, it's going to work, but are they guaranteed speeds? Is it going to work? Is it going to sort out your streaming service? And again, Netflix is cracking down a lot because they don't allow you to use your Netflix outside of your country. So, and then if your VPN for some moment fails and all of a sudden your IP address comes out as of Portugal, Netflix will figure that out. And it'll probably kind of like ban you or stop it permanently. So be very careful. Make sure you get a good VPN out there. Or just get a Netflix service here, for example, there, and you have access to the same content.
I believe you have access to all the same content across the European Union in Portugal.
As far as I know, yes.
Okay. When you get a SIM from a Portuguese, if you sign up for a mobile phone company, is it going to be a hard SIM or an eSIM, or do you get a choice?
Normally, there's a shortage of stocks of eSIMs, where normally the eSIMs are at the shop. So what do? We do the contract. I normally always have physical hard SIMs here with me in stock. I tell the number straight away, which is good. Imagine someone's coming over, moving here in 2 or 3 weeks. Say, Fernando, well, what's going to be my phone numbers? I will tell you immediately what your phone numbers are going to be. So then you can give it out to banks. Some people bank business cards. And then when you arrive, if you need the eSIM, you go to the shop and they'll give, after installation, they give you an eSIM to replace that number. So that's very simple to do.
And then there's a question about home internet is obviously for 2 years. Are cell phone contracts typically for 2 years as well?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And how does, when you have, because I know these things can be quite complicated. If you're first time moving to another country, you've probably never thought about putting 2 SIM cards in your phone before, but how does it work with WhatsApp? Do you know, can you have 2 WhatsApps on the same phone, or do
normally no, you can only have 1 WhatsApp account per phone number normally,
okay.
as far as I know, yes, only 1.
But
then imagine, for example, sorry to interrupt, you have an American WhatsApp number, and then you get a cell phone line here, and then you all of a sudden want to change. If all of a sudden, and I'm having a conversation with James on my American number, and then all of a sudden I have a Portuguese number, on the WhatsApp chat, you receive a small message saying, for example, in this case, Fernando has now updated his number from +513 to the Portuguese number. So it gives you a notification that you've updated your number, and even on the number of that contact. So WhatsApp does that cautiously and tells you every time the WhatsApp number is changed on that account, it tells all your contacts has been changed.
Okay. And then there's a question where someone has bought an apartment in a brand new building. So the address hasn't been established yet, but it is in Porto. Is it likely that that's going to have fiber internet?
I see. It was a very good question. That's something we hadn't talked about. So new buildings, new properties, how does it work? In that case, he doesn't have an address yet. He's sending the GPS coordinates. What happens there? I look around, and if I see all the buildings around have fiber, then they will very likely install fiber on that. But on a new building being built here, I don't like to say the responsibility. Let's say the person who is selling that, or the builder, should be very conscious and do all the calls and all that is necessary, the steps, to speak with the provider who can guarantee fiber to that address. What I find a lot of times is someone who bought a new apartment in a brand new building, and I have probably the first person who bought it or who needs fiber, and I say there's no fiber available. I ask around all the operators, no request has put in. I then have to ask the operator to build what we call a PDO, which is a fiber connection box on the road, in the case of us sitting underground, and that could take 1, 2, 3 months. So it's important you ask your builder, is there any fiber yet? Are you going to connect it? Because that could take a bit of time for the operator to connect it. And especially in cities, imagine they have fiber passing underneath the main road. If they need to dig up that sidewalk to pass the fiber cable into the building, that brings City Hall issues where City Hall needs to authorize that. And then after they authorize it, the operator has to pay a license. And City Hall sometimes could take months for them to authorize them to cut off that section of sidewalk and connect fiber. So important, the builders here, the developers, make sure they do all necessary contacts to have fiber installed.
Okay. And then Kerry Mendes has said very helpfully that you can receive US bank texts by turning off your cell phone service and installing your US SIM card and connecting to Wi-Fi, and then you can receive them that way for free. So you can switch the SIM cards in and out.
I've heard that. I don't know how it works in practice. That's why if you probably speak with someone coming from the same country as you, I'm sure someone's gone through the same steps and will be able to guide you and say what you need to do to keep your foreign number working here for banking purposes.
And I know people have been very, very interested in what you've had to say, and they're wondering about your professional services. Is this something that you charge for, Fernando?
No, as I think I said at the beginning, I think so. It is completely free of charge. I receive a sales commission. Imagine someone goes into a shop or calls the call center and does that sale over the counter at a shop or over the phone with the helpline. Whoever does that sale receives the commission. When I do the commission, I receive it directly. I do not charge 1 cent, and never should a salesman like me charge money. We receive commission. I don't like to lie things that way. That's why I do it. If I was doing this free of charge, I wouldn't be able to be here. And I don't have hidden costs. My services are all free. So I receive from the operators, and then I do the service free of charge for my clients.
Okay. And I'll just try and get through a couple more questions. So if someone's coming to Portugal just to visit, what's their best solution in terms of mobile data?
Get a pay-as-you-go SIM card at the airport. Grab one. They'll have pay-as-you-go SIM cards for 15 days, 30 days. See if you need 10 gigabytes, 20 if you need unlimited. They'll sell you pay a one-off payment, and you're sorted.
Okay. And then in terms of the channels that you're available to get with the packages, Sloan is in financial services, so she needs to watch channels like Bloomberg and CNBC. Are these ones likely to be available with a TV
Those
package?
are CNBC are premium channels, which you have to pay separately for.
Okay.
Bloomberg, as far as I can remember off the top of my head, I think is not available there, but I can send a list where they are, and you have the premium channels, which you have to pay separately for. So probably if you're coming over, need to specifically have those channels. You might want to see online, for example. Surely those channels might have an online way to see it through streaming, so that you can continue to connect it to your economical information.
Okay. And if someone rents an apartment, can they choose the internet provider they want, or must they go with the one the apartment owner has had before?
Well, morally, if you're renting the property, you should be able to choose what you want. But again, you have to ask authorization for the landlord. Can I install fiber there? I think some landlords, or in general, the landlords, should provide already fiber. At least I've told them this to millions of landlords. Imagine you are paying a rent of, for example, 1,000 euros per month. If the landlord can do a home internet service for 40 euros per month, if he were to charge 1,050 euros and included, I think it'd make more sense than having the client pay. But yes, you can choose whatever operator you want. As long as your landlord says, yes, you can install internet, he's fine with it, there's no problem. And normally landlords won't mind, because then that's a cost the tenant is having. And at least when the next tenant comes in and say, oh, wait a second, I'll rent to the apartment. Are you sure you have fiber? Yes, you have fiber. My previous tenant had it, so you can also install fiber. And then you can choose whichever one you want, or depending which ones actually do provide fiber. Because as we said many times, you don't always have all three providers supplying fiber to the same building. Because if you have one provider supplying fiber to the building, probably the other providers won't get involved, because if all tenants, or for example, there's 4 different floors on the building, and there's 4 contracts with provider A, if provider B comes in, it's hard for them to get all those clients on board unless they give much lower prices. So generally there's at least 1 operator, 2 maximum. Very rarely do you see all 3 operators supplying service to the same building.
Okay. I completely agree with you. I think, yeah, it would make life a lot easier if landlords provided the internet, rather than you moving into a place and having to take on that responsibility and potentially then planning on moving again in 6 or 12 months, and then you're stuck with this internet contract.
Because if you're renting to a foreigner, he will need internet. So it's like, come on, if I was a landlord, I would put fiber. It's, again, as I said, fiber or internet is as essential as the oxygen we breathe. So if you don't supply fiber or internet, it's kind of like not supplying water, electricity. It doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. And someone's asking if they can get a list of the premium channels available. I guess the best thing then would be to fill out the form and
get
say
in touch.
which property. Okay,
Yes.
I will send that through. One person's asking, can they keep their email address when they move?
Oh yes, for sure. Yes, you can change. You can keep your email address. Imagine you change address to different address. You can keep the email address or give a new one, or your bank. You can change your bank details too. When people also something else, when they go to change address, they can get back in touch with me, and I can help do the change of address.
Okay, and even if you sign up with, let's say, for example, Mayo, and you get an email with Mayo, should you use that email address? Is that one that you're going to keep if you end up leaving that company later on?
What do you mean if you use that same email address for that company?
I think when you sign up and when you get internet with a company, sometimes they offer you an @Mayo or an @Vodafone email address.
Yes.
Would you get to keep that email address if you then I didn't have an internet contract with them anymore?
Oh yes, you can keep with it. There's no problem. You can keep your email address. There's no issue with that. And then even on the contract, it's people say, oh well, I'm signing a contract now. It's not installed. The issue is if you don't sign the contract, the operator doesn't allow me to book the installation. The contract signed allows me to prove the operator. The client generally wants fiber. Now, imagine worst case scenario, something happens where fiber isn't possible to install. I'll give a possibility why that could happen, but imagine it's not installed on that day. Client said, well, what happens now? I've signed the contract, will I start paying? No, you only start paying, you only legally bind into the contract once it's installed. You sign it, and then once it's installed. If it's not installed, you don't have to pay. What could go wrong for fiber not to be installed? Imagine in the cities, generally it's fairly good, not big issues. Imagine a rural area. I see on system, I see with the coordinates, you can have fiber. The technician arrives and says, well, I can't because the fiber connection box on the road is full. What happened? Then I have to he contacts the operator. I follow it up where they have to send a technical team to expand the capacity of that box so that the new slot can be created to connect to the client's house. You only start paying once it's installed. They deal with all the costs of expanding that box. And people ask, well, Fernando, why does that happen? You told me there was fiber available. Simple reason. Imagine we have a street in a state and rural area with the capacity for 20 clients, and that box is full. On the last installation of fiber, the technician opened the box and connected to the slot, but he forgot to tell the operator, listen, guys, this box is full. On system, the operator tells me, Fernando, we have 1 or 2 slots available. And then when the technician goes there, no, it's not available, it's full. So then we have to expand the box. So I base what's on system. If they say it's possible to have fiber installed, it will be. It could be a small setback where then the box has to be expanded. Very rarely does this happen, but it could happen. So that's just to explain. And when that does happen, no problem, because you only start paying when it's installed.
Okay. So there are a couple of questions from people sort of saying, which is the best cell phone company for a particular region, or which is the best one for internet for that region? I think, again, the answer then is to fill out the form and you, because this is something you're going to have to look at manually.
Yes,
you can't
exactly one-to-one. Exactly. We have to look on each case there.
Okay. And so that would be, the same for the different Azores Islands and Madeira as well. You would need to look at that. Perfect. For someone who comes to Portugal and gets one of those sort of tourist SIM cards where it gives them enough data for it, do you know if that can be renewed if they decide to stay for another month?
You have to check with the operator or the shop what they sold you. Normally, you have to, when you buy those pay-as-you-go SIM cards, ask specifically. What I have here, unlimited data for 30 days and ask them, well, what happens after 30 days? Can I renew it or not? Because some of the plans the operators sell, the pay-as-you-go cards, are one-off cards only, where you cannot renew it. Others allow you to top it up. So specifically ask. And if you do have to get another one, the only consequence is you have a new number. That would be the only consequence.
And then, sorry, we're jumping around a little bit.
No problem.
Going back to home internet, sort of improving the connection. The Google Wi-Fi mesh systems, I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I've heard of that.
Okay. Do you know if that's something that would work in Portugal, or is that something that someone would need to look into?
I mean, the mesh networks, as far as I understand, is basically creating here a system of a few repeaters where it connects to the main router and then pushes the Wi-Fi signal a bit further on. That will work. Again, when you have a big house, you'll never have any operator that can say, our router will supply Wi-Fi for the whole house. Depends on various factors. If you have a big house, put some repeaters in. Imagine you have a two-story house. You will never have fiber, your main router, let's suppose, on the ground floor, and then on the first floor, you won't be able to get fiber up there. So you have the mesh network, which spreads the fiber through the whole property. Then you even have modern equipments with work on what they call power lines. As far as I know, you plug it into the socket, and then the Wi-Fi goes to the electrical system of the house. So you have various solutions available to spread the Wi-Fi throughout the whole property. Or some people even do it the more old standard way, which is always guaranteed, which is you have a fiber cable, an Ethernet cable connected from the main router. You put a secondary router on the first floor. It connects to that first floor router, and then it supplies the full speed. So obviously that's another possibility to have.
Okay. Well, Fernando, I think we're going to wrap up there because there have been so many questions that you've answered. There's a couple left that are a little bit more specific, so I'm just going to send you over the details for those, and you could perhaps get in touch with them.
I will then try and answer them as soon as I can. James knows how I am. I try to reply back on the same day. I ask people, please be patient if I take more than one day. I answer to every single email. I'm very cautious. Even when James forwards me one of these inquiries, I always put James in, and this so you understand how I work with James. I put him in CC in the first email so that he knows I replied. That way he can take it off his inbox, knowing that I've replied to it. From there, I take it with the client. But I do give an answer to every single client. If I don't answer on one day, I'll answer on the following. Many different tasks. So obviously, I'm a human being. I'm not perfect. I'm not a computer. And again, it's what we're saying here. It's not a set reply for each client. I have to look into it. Even though I have a standard message when there's fiber available or 4G, I check the options. I have to manually check each address. I can't simply tell my computer, reply to this or that. I have to look into each address. So if I get an average in easily of, let's say, around 30 to 40 emails per day, another 20 to 30 WhatsApp messages, you can all imagine how much time that takes and to answer back, to try to do a good work. So if I don't reply today, I'll answer tomorrow, after tomorrow. I will not take 1 or 2 weeks to reply. If that happens, I've died probably. I will not take 1 week to reply. I will reply within 48 hours. If you get in touch with me on a Saturday, on a Sunday, I will try to reply. But again, I do have my family, my life. If I don't get back on the weekend, I will then try to reply back within 1 to 2 days. And James knows how I am. And a lot of times I'll be replying here, let's say around 11 p.m. midnight. I am up, but probably I'm going to go off to bed. So I try to at least reply that same day, because I know with the time difference from here to America, if I reply here at around midnight, probably 6, 7 p.m., then people can reply to me overnight. So I try to do my best so that we can all be here in line.
Yeah, Fernando does CC me into everything, but honestly, I don't need to check up on anything to make sure they're replied to. I know that every single message he gets does get replied to. So it is the most efficient person I think that I have ever worked with in my life. So I'm very pleased to have you today.
I think it has to do with the way business goes. I'm not the average Portuguese. I have the Canadian background, which obviously taught me to try to reply back to everything. I know sometimes we have a bit here of a bad reputation, Portuguese, for being very slow to reply, and James knows it. I'm different. I do try to reply back fast when I can. I do a few other services, which then once I reply to you, I'll tell you a few other services I do, and then you'll fully understand I do. And James knows of quite a few other services which requires some attention too. So that's why I try to do a bit of everything. And again, being an estate agent taught me to help clients from beginning to end. And obviously, with the other services I do also, you'll understand it's all tied up to the moment of buying a property. So that's why I try to help the client from beginning to end. And that was one of the things I learned as an estate agent. the buying a property or renting a property does not end when you sign the contract, the sales deed, or the lease. It also has to continue on when after sales, getting the utility set up. And that's where I jump in. So I grabbed my experience. I saw all the complaints I heard of clients saying no one's helping me, and I said, no, I'm going to do a different service for my clients and try to build a life and a career around this.
Well, I really appreciate it. And I think everybody who's been on the webinar today has appreciated. There's a lot of people who are saying thank you and saying that it's been very informative.
It's been my pleasure. I think these webinars like James is doing, it's fantastic. It helps everyone. I think we should all participate. We should not, and I say this a million, should not be shy. Ask. I know what it's like. I've been in all of your shoes before. Don't feel ridiculous for asking a question. I honestly do not laugh at questions. I think that's a lack of respect. We all have the right to ask the questions. I really doesn't matter to me what client, the background. A lot of that stereotype with Portuguese businessmen, oh, they're foreigners, they're rich. For me, there's no rich or poor. A client is a client. There's a standard price, they pay the standard price. I don't care if someone's wealth. All I care is that I helped someone, and that's all it's about. Portuguese sometimes are looking into, oh, if it's someone rich. No, that does not apply here. For me, we are all human beings. We're all the same. I do everything online, and that's why I'm so efficient. Very rarely will I be out in the office. I normally work from home. I like it that way. 98, 99% of the times, it's all online. Very rarely do I meet a client. If someone asks me for dinner, for lunch, to meet up, it's very difficult. Living here in central Portugal, I'd be traveling around, I wouldn't be able to do it. So I've dealt with clients also everywhere from all the way northern Portugal, Braga, Porto, Gaia, Coimbra, Lisbon, the Algarve, the Alentejo, all sections of Portugal. So I've met many people over the internet. I think it's amazing we are able to help this. And at the end of the day, what makes me happy is that I know I made someone's life easier. When they arrive in Portugal, they have their internet set up. If there's any setbacks, I'll help. Whether in the Madeira Islands and the Azores, people say, well, not many people there. It doesn't matter. I don't need to be there. I can do everything online. I'm always contactable 24 hours a day. People can get in reach with me through my WhatsApp, and I will reply. I like WhatsApp a lot. I'll be honest. It's very handy for me a lot of times. So when I reply to you, on the inquiry form that James has a link here to, you're gonna have my number. It's been the same for the past 23 years. Feel free to WhatsApp me. It's very easy for me to do it sometimes when I'm out and about.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Fernando. It's been really helpful.
My pleasure. Okay, thanks, James. Take care.
And
Bye.
we'll have you back again sometime.
Sure, thanks. Have a good day. Enjoy yourselves.
You
Take
too.
care. Bye.
Bye.